Hello everyone and welcome back for another Brutus Monroe video. Today I'm going to be using this darling little stamp set. This is the stamp of the month. Isn't that so cute? And I'm also going to be using the stencil of the month in a very subtle way, but I'm going to show you a cool way to use it. And it has so much detail, but I'll tell you, I imagine that the rest of the team has done some incredible things with this stencil. So let's go ahead and get started with what we're doing. So I have a piece of watercolor paper that I have cut down to 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. And I also have some Simon Hurley Clear Skies ink. I'm going to blend this all over that background, being pretty generous and not really that worried about streak marks or circular marks. I don't need a perfect blend, even though these inks do a really beautiful job of blending nicely. And that didn't take any time at all. And I do like that these inks can be intensified. So I'm just blending that around, kind of making it a little bit darker towards the bottom. Now I'm going to take that stencil and I am going to just take some clean water and spritz that all over that stencil, flip over my piece, set that down right on top, and then just take a microfiber cloth to push and make sure that I'm getting that stencil down well. I'll pull it up and you'll notice that because these inks are reactive, you can see that stencil very subtly in the background. And I think that is so cool. So we're going to heat set that. It'll intensify it just a little bit more. And then once that's all dry, I'll show it to you. I just think that's a neat way to use a stencil. All right, one of my favorite things to do is take the Aqua pigment in the color Pearl and splatter that all over a background because it adds this shimmery, just gorgeousness that's very subtle and very beautiful. So I'll take a very tiny paintbrush and splatter, splatter, splatter. And these are very tiny droplets. If you want bigger droplets, you'd use a bigger brush. And it doesn't look like much right now, but I'll show you here in a second how that's going to look in the light. And because these inks are reactive, it just sets nicely on there. So check that out. Make a very nice underwater background. All right, I'm inking up my stamp with the Raven Detail ink, which is a good ink for alcohol inks and also for watercoloring. And I've stamped that down onto the alcohol paper that Brutus Monroe now carries. And this stuff, I will tell you, is great. I'm going to be using my ARTEZA EverBlend markers. These are some really nice alcohol markers. I don't have the full set. I've said that a zillion times, but this is a great little set that I do have, and I'll have that linked down below. Because sometimes Copic markers can be a pretty expensive option, but ARTEZA EverBlends are a good option that are a little less expensive. And so I've put down, my color combos look a little bit funny at first, but just stick with me. It ends up turning out. So I've got the colors up on the screen. I've got that 941 that I put down first, which is more of an olive, and then I've come back in, well, this 942 is actually called olive green, but I put that over the top, and now I'm putting some dots down with a 2492. Just adding a little bit of texture to their shell and trying to put some shading and shadowing where I think it might be. And then, now this is where it gets a little crazy. I bring in the neon yellow, which is the color 301. And yeah, it looks crazy. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look right. But I will say stick with it because here I've got the 5948, which is a lime green. And once you bring that in and then you kind of blend out your neon yellow, it really looks pretty good. So I'm actually super happy with how this is turning out. But yeah, originally when I put down the neon yellow, I thought, what were you thinking? But this is where kind of practicing and playing around with your colors comes in super handy because you might kind of come up with some combos that you never would have thought of before. And I really do like this combo together. This one will go into my possibly do again. And I think it really helps that that little image is just so darling. I'll color their eyes this blue color, and then the shell is going to be a neon orange. Next, we'll fussy cut out each of our little turtles. This is super simple. I'm just leaving a nice little white border around each of my images. I typically tend to do that. And if you are new to fussy cutting or if you have any questions about it, I do a little tutorial over on my channel. And so I will have that linked down below if that's something that you might be interested in checking out if you need a few tips and tricks on fussy cutting. Once that's done, I'm going to grab out my card base, which will be some Not Your Mama's heavyweight cardstock that I've cut down to 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches, and I'm scoring it at 4.25 inches. And someone asked the other day, how do I make sure that the little fibers don't break up and make it kind of pilled? And all I do is I score it on the front and the back. I trimmed off a little bit of my background, just the bottom portion, and I'll save that for later. And I put some embossing ink on the top, and then I've covered that with some Marshmallow Puff embossing powder. I did this because I just wanted it to look a little bit like seafoam, and I will tell you that the Marshmallow Puff is really cool. So it does puff up. It's not like a drastic puff, but it is absolutely very different than the regular alabaster embossing powder, which is a fine detail embossing powder. Check that out. It looks pretty cool. I decided I want to have one of the circles, so I'm going to grab out my Circle Foundations die because I want that to be a little bit of a background for my image. And then I'm also going to stamp the sentiment using that Raven Detail ink. I'll stamp that down on the top of this white cardstock that I have. And then I'm going to grab out my guillotine trimmer, and I will trim this down a little bit, just kind of lining it up with the clear cover plate that's on there. And you can usually get a pretty good cut when you do it that way. And then I will put it in there at an angle, and I will cut an angle on my sentiment. I'll attach it down just using some craft glue. And then once that's all lined up straight, I'll do the same thing with my circle, and I'll actually have my circle kind of sticking off the side just a little bit, just a very little bit. And once that's on, I'll flip that over and trim off the excess. And to attach down my adorable little turtles, we're going to use some Brutus Monroe foam tape on the back of that, and I'm just using a paper piercer to peel off all of the release paper on that. And then once that's off, we'll stick it down. And then I'm going to stick this down to the front of my card, and it does have a nice white border up at the top, and I wanted that to look like we're under the water, so I don't know if I actually achieved that, but I like the way this looks. I did end up, you don't see it on screen, but I end up using a corner rounder on the very top left and right corners of this card, because I just thought that really added to the look of the card, and you'll see that at the very end in the pictures. And then I'm going to take that leftover piece that I cut off, and I'll stick that on the inside of the card, and that's where our other little set of turtles is going to go as well. You know, I can't just make cards and not do the insides these days, so we'll tack that down with some more of that craft glue, and then I'll trim off all the excess. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I have some silver prism sequins, and these are gorgeous. They're super shiny. They just hit the light and, you know, kind of dance a little. The light does. It's pretty. And I'll just stick that down with some more of that craft glue. And when we're done with that, that's actually going to finish off our card. I just am so happy with the background. I think it's nice and subtle and cute, and it really makes those turtles pop on the front. So if you liked this card, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, we will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.